Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming along this morning. We have a very exciting panel for you today. Chris Rides will be the moderator, and we have some very talented and experienced panelists, Didi Buharto and Larry Trichu, and they're going to speak about From Aspiring to Achieving, CISO Journeys Unveiled. Without further ado, please put your hands and welcome the panelists and the moderator this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for hanging out for a bit longer. Everybody's waiting for Alicia's keynote, right? I think that's what it is. And also thank you for being here rather than in Alex and Kevin's room. There's probably no room in that one. That's probably what's going on here. So thank you very much. I've got amazing panelists with me, so I think probably a good place to start would be for you guys just to give like a brief overview of what you're up to now.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. I am Didi Buharto. I am a 3-time CISO for Fortune 500 oil and gas companies. Actually, I was. Now I have my own cybersecurity firm, advisory, serving as a fractional CISO. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Larry?
And I'm Larry Trichu. I've worked as a CISO at places like GE, Synchrony, Barclays, and most recently Health Equity, and currently working with some of the smaller startups doing some advisory and consulting roles.
Thank you very much. I think a good place to start, we get a little bit of a feel of the audience. So how many entry-level people have we got in here? Hands up, please. Okay, all right, we're good. We've got a few. Good place to start. And then what about individual contributors, sort of early stage, up to 5 years? Yeah? A little bit more experienced, security architects, people like that, senior people. Okay, leadership. Oh, okay, right. How many people have actually got to that CISO stage? We've got some CISOs in here. Okay, great. Anybody unlocked the ultimate achievement and retired or semi-retired? No? Okay, all right, we're all trying to get there. So I think this is a nice balanced audience, lots and lots of experienced people and people trying to get to that CISO stage. I think how many know they definitely want to be a CISO, those that aren't already a CISO, because you might change your mind, right? Okay, good. All right, there's plenty of people here. There's a lot of different journeys your career can take, right? And we talk about CISO kind of being the ultimate title, but that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of other ways you can go if you want to stay technical. In fact, if you maybe even want to be a technical CISO. The CISO title itself doesn't align itself to one specific type of CISO. So we'll talk about that in a bit. Just so, you know, we're going to talk here with Larry and Didi. They've got some really interesting backgrounds. We're going to talk about how they broke into security. We'll also talk about them actually getting the CISO title, because that's a challenge that there's a lot of people in this room, I should imagine, struggling with. And then also, I'm a CISO, now what? All right, there's still the next challenges, the next things we're going to get to. So I think what a really good place to start with both of you would be to learn a little bit about how you got into cyber, but also what was your foundation before that? Didi?
Okay. My goal is my story to be inspirational for you all in case you are stuck in your career and wondering where to go next. I started out as a janitor. Yeah, cleaning toilets. I did not speak English when I came to this country, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just trying to get away from being married too young, arranged marriage, and so forth. I'm from Indonesia. So I came to the United States. I wanted to work in the library. I wanted to learn English, but since I couldn't speak English, they said you cannot work in the library unless you speak English. The only job that I could do, and I did not mind it at all, was being a janitor and washing the dishes in the cafeteria of the university that I went to. Fast forward, by junior year of my university year, I did not declare my major. And I got asked, you need to declare a major if you want to graduate. So I chose accounting because it was the first thing on the list. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Remember that. So that's another trick, that if you don't know what to do, just eeny, meeny, miny, moe. There are 27 alphabets. Then I knew that I wanted to be more than just being an accountant. I did not like accounting subjects. So this is the type of the foundation is that to become a CISO, you don't have to have that technical background, technical knowledge, certificates and everything yet, right? But that was my pivot. From being an accountant, I got my master's also of accountancy. Again, delaying marriage as much as possible. And I finally was hired by, back then, a public accounting firm, Big 8, Coopers & Lybrand, to become an EDP auditor. Does everyone know what EDP stands for? Louder? Electronic data processing. This was in the 90s. So this is a precursor of IT. IT was not even called IT then. So I was an EDP auditor, and I realized that, okay, this is what I like doing because there's a lot more of computer, even though it was mainframe, not necessarily doing a lot of the accounting, balancing the books. So from accounting, from being an EDP auditor, growing into IT security auditor and everything else, then I accidentally stumbled into a job as an information security analyst. And I said, sure, I wanted to learn more about information security, and I took that job. So through so many different level of careers, then I became promoted to become a CISO of 3 oil and gas companies. Again, this is, if you're following this, so I kept moving up. But at some point, my family needed me. I have 2 children who were going through transition in high school, very, very tough. I decided to become the number 2 security architect. My ego hurt. All of a sudden now, from being number 1, now I'm a number 2. But I kept thinking about my purpose. My purpose is for my family, not just for the work. So I became the number 2 chief security architect, loved it because I was no longer on the call all the time. And then finally I decided to quit and then started my own firm, which was about a year ago. And now I'm back in my trajectory, and I'm not even done yet. So stay tuned, we're gonna go through that. But
Watch
that's
this
my,
space.
that's my journey so far.
There we go. Thank you very much, Dee Dee. Larry, how about yourself?
Awesome. So I think when we planned this, I was going first, so I didn't have to follow that. But,
Yes. Yeah, when you switched around, when you did the seats the other way, it completely threw me.
Yeah. So mine was, it's really completely accidental. So what's interesting is I'm doing some of this consulting work now. I'm looking for what's the next right full-time thing. I'm not ready to be done yet. And I still catch myself, right now, thinking about planning and positioning myself for the future. But if I look back 10 or 20 years, like, what a dumb idea. We think we're in control, and it just kind of happens. And so, for me, I wanted to be a pilot from a very early age, and so I went to the Air Force Academy and flew airplanes for 10 years. And, I've got an engineering background from schooling, and then that's a little bit technical, I guess, being a pilot, but certainly didn't grow up writing code or hands-on kind of IT technical. And so I transitioned from the military by consulting, which I think was great, and that was really my first foray into IT and technology, and ended up at GE at a time, a long time, it's a little embarrassing how long ago, right? Where it was firewalls at the time. No one had heard of the term advanced persistent threat then. And I was in our military systems IT team, and the Air Force sent a note to the CIO and said, send a representative to a meeting. And that was really it. And come to find out, basically they looked at me and said, hey, new guy, you were in the Air Force, you don't have much work to do, go to that meeting. And that just so happened to be a group of companies that were being targeted by this new thing that they were going to call the advanced persistent threat, so you could talk about it on an unclassified basis. And I called my boss and said, hey, this is all about security. We've got this problem, this thing we need to work on. I'm really excited. And he said, security, you like run as fast as you can. You don't want to be sideways with the CIO, the CTO. And I ignored his advice, and I've been doing security ever since. So really just kind of dumb luck that I ended up doing that. And we'll talk a little bit about the journey of getting to the top job, but
Yeah. I think like the thing with both of you is I feel like you talk about it like you fell into it, but the truth is we do a lot of stuff in the background. Every one of you out there, there's probably a lot of people here that also feel they fell into cybersecurity or you fall into certain careers, and that's not actually the case, right? All of the stuff that you're doing, maybe without thought towards, gives you those opportunities, right? Creates those opportunities, opens up the doors. And so this talk is really about hearing some very inspiring stories, but taking out of that the things that we can impact, the things that we can actually put a little bit of thought into so that your career trajectory can be a lot quicker. And I should say, like, from my end, by the way, I'm a cybersecurity recruiter. So I spent 25 years doing recruitment. 2012 started a cybersecurity staffing company. I'm not technical, which is great because I'm never the smartest person in the room, and they tell you that's the best thing to be. But what the things that I'm going to add to this is really from all of the different careers and all of the different CISOs that I've spoken to and all of the different people that have moved along in their journeys, I'm sort of pulling out the little bits that hopefully, you know, these stories are going to inspire you to do and take them on board and actually put them in consciously into your career path. So I think let's jump to actually that movement up to leadership, because being an individual contributor and then becoming a leader, there's a lot of things that you can work on to get there. There's a lot of different specific things that help you move in that direction. So Larry, I've thrown you under the bus, so I might as well go to you next. How did you end up in your first leadership position?
Yeah, so the leadership piece is interesting because having been an officer in the military, you're a leader from a very young age. And this is one of the things we've talked about in preparation. I almost took a step back a little when I went into the consulting world, where I'd been leading, I'd been in charge of something in a program, in a group, and went more to an individual contributor role before moving back into leadership. And so for me, again, it was, and the book Who Moved My Cheese is just so good because it's so true. You just want to execute and be the person who's delivering, and that's what gets you promoted. And then it's completely different at that point because now you're trying to succeed through others and being a leader. And so for me, that's what I was doing is I sat down and worked through security, trying to build out the program. I got support for us to do that, and we drew an organization on the whiteboard and said, well, it wasn't chalkboard, I'm not that old, it was an actual whiteboard. And then I raised my hand and said, hey, I'll take that organization if you want me to. And so that was my first corporate leadership role that I moved into.
Lovely. Yeah, I think stepping up into it, that should be that's probably the most common way I see people moving into leadership, is just moving gradually into that. Dee Dee, how was your sort of experience getting there?
Yes, I started out as information security analyst for an oil and gas company startup called Halliburton. And then later on, I was an individual contributor, young working moms of two. My husband decided to go back to school. Yes, I finally got married, but to a man, my own choice. And then the first leadership position was I was elected to become the chair of the American Petroleum Institute Cybersecurity Committee. I was still an individual contributor at Halliburton, but I was active in that trade organization. And I really didn't know, I didn't want to accept it because before it was called imposter syndrome, I just didn't think that I was qualified. My boss actually said that if they elected you, they see something in you, you should take it. So I became the chair of the American Petroleum Institute, the first female cybersecurity committee. From there, then I worked a lot with the leadership among super major oil and gas companies. They said, why don't you come join my team? That's why I worked for many of them, and do the transformation or become a leader, because back then cybersecurity was really, it's not even called cybersecurity then. It was really just pioneering up, and we were targeted by nation states. Only a handful of us, the Chinese group, were attacking us. And so then I joined Marathon Oil as an information security analyst. Now, this is the type of attributes that we're going to talk about later on. You all know I'm bossy. So even though I reported to CISO, I started telling him, okay, this is not what we need to do, this is what we need to do, boom, boom, boom. He finally got tired, I'm going to suggest that you get promoted to become in my position, then I go somewhere else, within the company. So that's how I got into my first leadership position in the company, managing people. It was not easy, because it's easy being bossy upward than actually managing people, because you really have to care. Now their future is in your hands. And so that was my first leadership role through promotion, but most of all is to be out there to show people what leadership quality that you have. You don't have to have the title, but that leadership, compassionate, vision, communication, those are the things and then bossy, that made me become first leader.
I think what you're talking about there is kind of, so there's something in my old business, we used to talk about act as if, act as if you're going to do the job that you want to do. And I think that's what you're talking about there. You take on the leadership roles, you see opportunities, and you take the opportunity to then talk about what we need to be doing. And then once people start seeing you as a leader, whether you've got the title or not, you're a leader. Right? That's how we end up with captains of teams and that sort of stuff, and that's how they move on to management. So I think a lot of what we can be doing at that level is just putting yourself out there. And there's a lot of leaders already here, so I'm conscious we're preaching to the converted here, because most of the audience are leaders already. I think there are always turning points in all of our careers, and certainly over the last 12 months, we've seen quite a lot of layoffs in all industries, right? And so I'm meeting people that are very experienced but aren't working at the moment. And that's a real kick in the teeth for a lot of us, and especially people that are joining an industry where everybody's been talking about, it's totally protected. We don't lay off cybersecurity people. Not saying that I would ever say that, but I should imagine the people that are selling certifications are doing a lot of that sort of stuff. All right, so both of you have been through periods where you've had to either take a step back or a sideward step. I think it's good to share those sort of experiences to let people know that that's something we all go through, right? The career ladder isn't linear. I always say it's a bit more like snakes and ladders. Is that a thing in America? I know in the UK it's a thing here as well, right? Yeah, I have been living here 15 years, but I think about stuff growing up and it was all in the UK. So yeah, snakes and ladders, that's what your career's really like. It's not just a ladder. So you guys, can you share a little bit about your experiences of having to make major changes and the impacts of those now looking back on them?
You want to go first, Larry?
Sure, I'll go. Yeah, so I think, certainly I made a pivot in going from the government and government work or military to corporate. So that was a pivot. I think, more importantly, it's that ladder thing, right? We all think there is a ladder. And for me, the number 2 roles were great, and moving into that number 1 role was a bit of a pivot. But then, I had a perfect example when I left Barclays, where you think from a career, okay, if I'm at Barclays so I was the Chief Security Officer of the Americas and the CISO for Barclays International. So we had a security team of 2,000 people. I had 500 people on the team. And I got a phone call from a recruiter to talk to Health Equity. Never heard of Health Equity, no idea what this is. But here's this post-breach role to come in and lead their security program. And Health Equity was 1,200 people company at the time. So 1,200 people in the company. When I first got there, it was 13 of us. Most people, if you're thinking about the role, would have looked at the revenue and the size of the company and just the shine of that brand of a Barclays versus that particular role, and said, well, why would I take that? But in this case, if I now look back and think about the growth that I had in that role, it's unbelievable. So I convinced it was a direct report to the CEO. I convinced the CEO to make it a converged security. So I started with physical and cyber and fraud. We grew the company from 250 million in revenue to $1 billion in revenue in 4.5 years. 1,200 people to 3,500 people. it was just, and in the end, I had IT, I built out our second line program. So just so much growth that you got out of that was not part of the assessment going into the particular role. That was just something that happened over the years. And I can even talk about where I am now, right? So, okay, that one's over. Now what am I gonna do next? And this is the first time in my career that I've been able to spend a lot of time looking at startups and venture capital. I have had a couple of experiences with smaller companies, and you know, you imagine at GE, just startups don't scale, so it was really hard to do that. I did hitch myself to a startup at one point, and it went miserably. It was the wrong founder, and so this is giving me a different flavor. And I came out of this and I thought, oh, I'm going to go talk to a venture capital firm. I want to go into like a COO role at some smaller company, maybe a C, D series. Hey, it doesn't work that way. You actually have to have a relationship and you have to know them. And so this is a great learning opportunity and a pivot for me where I'm meeting, you know, entrepreneurs, I'm meeting these VC firms, and it's just a different set of relationships that I would really encourage everybody to look at.
Yeah. And similar to Larry, so when I consciously, by choice, taking a number 2 role as a security architect, it was because back to the family, right? My family comes first. And then, but you do still have to own your career roadmap. I've always had an executive coach who helped me go through, I was sharing this with the gentleman, and I posted on LinkedIn as well. The Ikigai, what you love doing, what your strengths are, what the world needs, and what pays, right? I've always gone through the exercise. So taking the number 2 role, even though it's still a process and emotional, it's still hurting, but I knew that this is not the end of it all. This was a transition until my children, I send them to college and everything else. And then when I decided to have my own firm, I also started my own Ikigai in a different way, because as a CISO for multiple billion-dollar companies, global, I saw the gap in the mid-market, even within the oil and gas, the suppliers and vendors. They did not have formal cybersecurity program. If the supply chain, those other supply chains, are not well protected, the big companies are affected because they're the ones who are delivering service and everything else. So I decided to become a fractional CISO, focusing on helping those medium-sized companies because they can't necessarily afford to hire a full-time CISO. And I also have a mission, and I put in the tagline on my LinkedIn, we do not let the bad guys win. So if that's part of your mission, in cybersecurity, pivot your career. If you are stuck somewhere now or where you want to be, you haven't decided where you want to go through the exercise, put the mission on your vision board, and I always put that on my wall, where I want to be, what is important for me, and then keep moving along that way. And if you have to make a left turn, right turn, it's okay. It's not the end of all. I'm still having some other career opportunities right now that I'm entertaining. So stay tuned maybe for next year.
I think when we look at careers, well, we said they're not linear anyway, but I've always looked back on the real tough challenges and when they come up, when you look back at them, it's always like a really important time in your life, and the things that I've found, at least afterwards, have tend to always been better than where I was before. And I think if you can try and remind yourself of that as much as possible, it makes going through those tough times and thinking about, wow, can't wait for the opportunity that this is going to bring, because I'm definitely due one, right? So, you know, if you can do those sort of things, then it will help you get through them. Now, there's a load of leaders here, and there was quite a few CISOs, but there was a lot more leaders in the audience than CISOs. So I imagine there's a lot of people here that are trying to achieve that. Like, how did you both actually get to that CISO title? So, Larry?
Sure. So, and I know this isn't necessarily what you want, but I guess as I've mentored some of my directs, you really need to think about, why do you want the CISO? title? And do you really want that, and is that what you're looking for? I think so many of us think that's the next level of success and don't realize you can be very, very successful in any of, in any role. You don't need to climb this ladder. And so think about like why you're wanting to achieve that. And for me, I always wanted to lead the program and kind of be responsible and accountable for that. And I had to think back to like when was the first time I had the actual title, and did I ever actually even have because I was CSO in the last one, did I actually have the CISO title? But that was at Barclays where I had that. And so for me, it was an open role that I applied to, and I think importantly, the way that I knew about the open role and the ability to apply, and probably a lot of the influence on the selection process, was my network. So I knew the global CISO for the or CSO for the organization who was hiring these roles, and so it just worked through the network. And I think for a lot of people, that you've got to work that network of peers, of friends, of recruiters, and a lot of times we get pulled into those roles as well. So, and I very much encourage people to take a BISO role at a larger company. I think learning alongside other people in a BISO role, learning while following a big CISO is I think a great way to learn. And also the number 2 roles. There's some really big number 2 roles out there that are a great way to learn and to step into it. And you would not believe the number of recruiter calls that happen we don't have an internal candidate. And so go and become that internal candidate by being a really strong number 2.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with Larry. With me, the first one was through promotion, like I was mentioning earlier. And then the subsequent one was being recruited, and I did demand the title to be a CISO. And when our time, CISO back then was not very common. We had to educate our management, did the research, what the responsibilities are, what you're willing to do and not willing to do. And, but back to the point of now, CISO roles are very much defined and on demand. Now you know, if you want to become a CISO, these are the responsibilities. Own that, build on it, and stick by it. So when you interview, look internally and externally. Internally, be visible. It's not about who you know, it's who knows you, right? So be visible. And if you think you want a CISO role, but there's already a position there, see if there's an opportunity that you could do that. If you don't think that's going to make it there within so many layers, don't be afraid to look outside.
Yeah.
Again, do your journaling, the ikigai. It's okay to look on the outside. Unless you have some personal reasons, either it's through pension and everything else, which is fine, right? But you need to know what you want. To me, the best way to do it, through pencil and paper, not digital, journal that. You see it, you compare it with last month's entry to today's entry. For me too, one day, and I was talking to Jess, my friend over there, she's a CISO for a big global company. There are days when you're having such a bad day and a recruiter calls you to change job, to be another CISO or something else. That is pivotal moment. So you can go through that exercise, and that's okay. Just remember to journal, know what you want, own it, take action on it.
Yeah. I've been guilty of making those phone calls a few times. Yeah, I think it's interesting that there's only, like when there's a promotion internally to CISO, there's often only one of those opportunities up, and there's probably several people in that company that think, hey, I should be next. And so obviously you want to be doing everything you can to try and ensure that the people there know that that's your expectation and that's what you're aiming for, so that hopefully you're going to get that opportunity. And if not, they're going to have a conversation with you because they're going to know how that might impact you. So if you can get it internally, great. There's also an awful lot of CISOs that have head of security or head of information security, titles. So you don't necessarily have the CISO title. Maybe there isn't a CISO title. A lot of companies are very funny about adding a C to any title. And so, you know, it might be a good thing to speak to people that are in that situation and ask for their mentorship and advice about how they persuade the company that you work for to actually create that CISO title. What are the reasons particularly for that business? And we got to think about it as a business because, you know, I know it's going to come up in a second, but, you know, business is absolutely one of the key attributes of any good CISO, understanding the business they work for and how every business is very different. And of course, yes, you can call, you know, and speak to recruiters and build relationships too. It's very important. I think you've got to keep all of your options open and look at see what kind of opportunities are out there. So I think we talked about you getting the CISO title. You've got that. The key things, and so I've been, over the last year and a half, I've asked over 500 CISOs what the top 3 attributes are to be a successful CISO. And actually a couple of hundred have actually replied to me as well, which is amazing because obviously they're thinking the next message from them is going to be, can I help you fill any jobs? So it's nice of them to actually reply to me. I've been collating all that information, and certainly Didi and Larry I've asked that of, and I think that's something I would love you to share with everybody here because there are absolutely key attributes that you see in a lot of successful CISOs, and there are things that we can do to build on those.
Yeah, I can go first about the attributes. Integrity. Let me tell you a story. My proud moment being a CISO, my career ultimate pride. I got fired. The reason? I refused to sign off on some ethical decisions under my name. It was hard. I did not know what to do. I called my coach. I was out of town when it was happening. At the end of the day, who do I answer to? Myself. There are many jobs out there. They can always choose from. You only have one integrity. You lose that integrity, it's going to be hard to get it back.
Or you go to jail.
Exactly. So that's my biggest attribute. You can be the highest level. You can be, even as a janitor, I kept my integrity. I wanted to be the best janitor in town, and I was. But remember, that's the number thing that you have on yourself that you can't get it back once you lose it. You have to answer yourself. Second is situational awareness. Many of us love to talk about ourselves, hearing our own voices, where when you become a CISO in a leader position, you need, when I say you all, right, to understand why you are in that role. What problems are we solving? If we're coming in just telling them, your baby is ugly, let me fix it for you, that's not situational awareness. Because they may have different pain points. They wanted to partner with you. But if you tell them that your program is no good, they're not going to want to develop that trust and relationship with you. The third one is communication, translating business language or technical language to business language, even just at the human level. Don't try to use big words to impress people. No, that's not how you develop relationship. But enough that people can understand and want to partner with you. So integrity, situational awareness, and communication.
Great. And I agree with all those, by the way, and this is why I have the sheet of paper up here, because he's asked me this question multiple times and I change the answer every single time.
I've got my top 10 just from Larry. I don't need to collate all the others.
But I think, so for me, I've answered like what are these top 3 with one, but 3 parts, and that is to have executive leadership skills. So I think when you think about cyber and where we are today, the number of openings in that, most of the open roles come from we're trying to grow the program, we're trying to mature the program, the person in the seat isn't there, it's a first time. We now have with the SEC rules a little bit more focus on boards and maybe boards, and a lot of us aren't ready for that. So I think we all need to work on our executive leadership skills, and I broke it down as people leadership, as business leadership, and as risk leaders. And I think the people side is really important because it's just very different. The higher you get, the skills, you realize you have to be a completely different leader, than you were years ago. We ran into Kevin Mandia in the speakers lounge before this, and I knew him 15 years ago at Mandiant, and I kind of dreaded saying hi just because, man, I don't know how proud I am of 15-year ago me, right? And just the growth that we have looking back. And so I would say work on, and we'll talk a little bit more probably on like some of the empathy and some of that. The other side is your business skills. So as I'm talking to companies now and looking at potential permanent, CISO roles, the research I do is look to see what's in the news about the company, and then I read their 10K, their Q, their annual proxy statement, annual report, understanding the business and what the company is trying to achieve. We all say we want a seat at the table. Well, there is accountability and responsibility that comes with the seat at the table. I've been in a lot of sessions where we're having interactive discussions like this, and everybody's saying, well, how do I get a seat at the table? And then we talk about, breach response and how do you make the decision whether to report it? And it's like, well, that's not, I don't want that decision. I'm going to leave that up to the general counsel. That's part of the seat at the table, right? Is that accountability and making those decisions. And so work on those skills. And then risk. I think back to my flying days a lot as a CISO, and often tell people, if you don't want to crash an airplane, boy, I'm getting on an airplane in a couple of hours. This is, if you don't,
It's all right, you're not flying it, so you're right.
It's going to be eerie if something happens because this is recorded. So if you don't want to crash an airplane, you've got to just keep it in the hangar. And you can imagine whether it's the Air Force or Delta Airlines, that doesn't work. You don't accomplish the mission, you don't make the money, and so it's all about risk management and those risk management skills. Same thing in security. It's not are we secure or not. It's understanding the risk appetite of the company, of the board, and of the leadership, and aligning your program to that risk appetite, and then communicating the status, the needs, et cetera, in terms of risk that they can understand.
Thanks, Larry. Famous last words, keep it in the hangar. Okay, so I'm conscious, I want to leave plenty of time because you all probably have way better questions than I do. But what I do want to do is ask just a couple of things. First of all, the attributes. There are a lot of ways to build attributes. How do you actually, what are a couple of ways that you know that you can actually review what are the attributes I need to work on? Right, how do you do that? So I don't know whether DD, I know you spoke a little bit about.
Yeah, journaling.
Yeah.
That's, even though I thought it was foo-foo, but I'm a strong believer of it. If I don't write it down, I'm not gonna remember. It's, even you think that you remember it's on your head. No, it's, to me, out of sight, out of mind. And you go visit because your journal from last week may be different from this week, depending on the situation, circumstances, and everything. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, coaching, mentoring, it's critical. If you don't have a mentor, you're wrong, right? Like, we all need to have mentors, and so get a mentor and use that. There's a lot of reading you can do. There are actually some professional HR books that are just great to really understand the different skills and what you need to do. And then a lot of firms, whether it's a consulting firm or whatnot, their development models and professional and
like DISC and Myers-Briggs, and I mean, I'm a big believer in SWOTs. I love doing a SWOT. So if you've not ever done a SWOT, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, sat down and done one actually on yourself, and start to work out what are the attributes you've got and what can you work on, I think they're really powerful. And there's an awful lot of ways you can work on this sort of stuff. Obviously, you've got your internal reviews as well, wherever you're working. I'm sure that you'll have access to those. But I think that, like, even if you think about things like business, I think it's important to see, right, reading whatever the stock reports are, right? Understanding what's driving the business. Like, who are your champions? Who are the people that are your stakeholders? What's driving them? How do they get their bonuses? I'm surprised how many people, you can have that kind of frank conversation. What is really driving you? What's your bonus on? How can I help security achieve what that needs to do and you achieve what you need to do. So understanding that sort of stuff. Sorry, Didi.
I have an additional point on that. I posted on LinkedIn my own career roadmap, so you can take a look at that. There are 10 steps, and every week I deep dive on each step. I didn't post this week because I'm here, but that's something I love to share with people, because that's something, when we've gone through all that, the best thing that we can do is to share with you all. So you have choices, you have perspectives and everything else.
Okay, so my last question. You go back in the magic time machine to Didi and Larry with hair, Didi with her mop, and you give yourself one piece of advice. What would that be?
You don't have to be the best in everything. Be the best combo meal.
Thank you.
I like that.
Think about that.
So you brought up the hair. I've been really self-conscious about these lights. I'm like, I wonder what the forehead looks like from out there. But so now I have to remember the question. No, so for me, having been in the Air Force, having been at a leadership development place like General Electric, it felt like everybody was stamped into a certain leadership style, and we all had this type, and so I think learning that you really have to adjust your style for different followers. It's more important to understand the followership aspect of leadership, I think, than the leadership, and then for me in particular, just empathy. Some of us are naturally more empathetic than others, and my first reaction is never one of empathy. And so if I could go back and just develop that empathy skill, I think it does us really well, and not just as people leaders, but as program leaders too. It's easy to say, hey, hey IT, just patch. Hey engineers, just develop secure code. When you walk in their shoes and understand, what's driving them, that it makes a difference.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to pop up all of our connection stuff there, take pictures. Myself, Didi, Larry, we'll happily answer any questions we don't get to in this. Both of them have fascinating stories that are way longer than this, and both of them have been recorded. I've got a Route to CISO podcast, which will be launching very soon. And Didi and Larry are two of a few CISOs that I've actually asked about their career. So if you want to hear more about that, you can absolutely go and check that out. So let's open the floor up to questions. If you can come and grab the mics. Oh, good. Okay, I'm not going to have to run down there and put it in people's faces. So, yeah, let's go. You please.
So you all mentioned relationships as being very important in the CISO role, and I found that as well. How do you sell diversity of thought in your hiring processes in your teams? Because one of the things that I think the statistics show, and I think we've all found in the industry, is that one of the shortcuts to relationship is hiring a bunch of people who look the same as the rest of the company.
Yeah. Oh, can I jump on this? Can the white guy answer this one first?
Yes. Please do. You're an ally. So.
Well, no. So I have two quick things, and then yours will probably be even better. But look, diversity begets diversity. And so you have to be very, very intentional in that. And then I think self-awareness is really important. We have to know what our blind spots are, and we have to hire people that are going to cover our blind spots. So this idea of hiring someone who quote unquote looks like you, right? That could be background, that could be it'd be race, religion, it doesn't matter what it is. But hiring someone who looks like you, you're not going to fill your blind spots, and that's going to be a huge leadership failure on your part.
Yeah. So thank you for that. For me, I made also an effort. I went through a different angle. I worked with HR and talent acquisition to change the language of the job description. So because many job descriptions now has been evidence that it tend to hire more males, especially in the cybersecurity, right? And more males usually, when the resumes came to me, sometimes in order for them to fill the filter, to bypass the filter, they say yes to everything. By the time it came to me, I looked and talked to them. They don't even have a cybersecurity background. So from, like what Larry's saying, intentional and everything else, then I'm also using different angle, working it from the HR and talent acquisition, and train them how to look for diverse talents.
Yeah, we talked about business being one of the key attributes. Hire within your business. I know somebody who's working within HR and is now an information security analyst, GRC, done amazing, absolutely amazing. So just think about what you've got within your business.
Hi. For me, just to plug on what has been just said, to get the CISO job was very important to actually pivot from my background in information security into actually acquiring an MBA. And I really resonate from what Larry said, that you need to understand the business, read these documents, financial report. However, this comes my question. I've seen many people that see the CISO role as like the peak, the culmination of a technical career, and there is too much of this from my perspective. And I often ask, are you sure you want to become a CISO because you can make good money in any other way, you know, as a consultant, maybe even more money in other things? So my question is, have you actually experienced cases where you have to actually turn down some candidate or some people coming to you and say, look, you don't have the necessary skills on business, you don't know what an EBITDA is or things like that. You come back and learn these things before you think of becoming a CISO.
Yeah, I think I'm going to add something just real quick on there. What you're talking about, like CISO, job titles are a little bit screwed up in our industry, right? Information security engineer does not tell me what you do. CISO doesn't really tell me what you do, because CISO for one company isn't the same as a CISO for another. CISO of a company that has no staff and uses a lot of third parties does a very different job to a CISO of probably Barclays, right?
It's part of the confusion, I think.
Yeah, part of the confusion. The title isn't always the same as the job. So you might not want to be a type of CISO that steers the big ships and takes a long time. You might want to be somebody that's really transformational and works better with small teams or startups. But sorry.
So yes, you know, I've had to turn people down for that or what. But I guess my biggest takeaway there, you know, let's use sports as an example, right? A football, like imagine a football team full of quarterbacks. They would suck. And so it takes the whole team, and I'll steal from Didi and just say, just be the best at what you are, right? Like we need everybody on the team, you know, from the janitor to the CISO.
Yeah, agree. So.
Thank you. Right, I think we probably just need to go to our last slide, because I don't think we're going to get to any other questions, but you guys can all hang about if you've got the time and actually grab us in person, if that's all right. We'll be about for a little while. So I think we'll finish off with just the learn slide, and just things that I think, like, if I'm going to set yourself targets, I'm a salesperson, right? That's what recruitment really is. I'm all about targets. So let's look at, like, next week, right? Can you go in and identify the attributes you need to move your career forward? Whether that's doing a SWOT, having a look at your reviews. Can you then identify what your next career step is? And, you know, you might get a surprise. You might have something different offered up that gets you in that direction, but at least try and identify it. And the next 3 months, I think you should look at prioritizing what those top attributes are that have come out of whether it's the SWOT or the review. Come up with a couple of different ways that you can upskill each of those, and you definitely can upskill them within your business, externally, being involved in groups. There's all sorts of things that you can do to really build those skills. And then start working on those improvements. And then the 6 months, like, we go in, reevaluate where you are in your career. We talk about CI/CD. For me, when I talk about CI/CD outside of software, but in careers, I'm talking about your career improvement and then your continual development. And that's what you should do. You should have a cycle where you're constantly going through what's next, what do I need to build on, and where am I? So thank you very, very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
I want to give a shout out to my cousin, Michael Baylor. He is a senior IT auditor with the City of San Francisco, as a former IT auditor as well. And after 22 years, we actually reunited this year in San Fran. Thank you.
Thank you, RSA, for letting us talk and bringing Didi together. So thank you very much.
Thank you.